welcome back to my home and garden here in Northeast Oklahoma. I'm Chip Jones and you've landed on the Preppy Gardener channel. And today is a day I've been looking forward to. It's a September garden tour. I love the fall season and it's finally starting to feel like fall. We have been grooming things up, trying to get things all back in shape. We've had a little bit of a hot summer. It hasn't been too bad. Some rain, which we're being very thankful for, but the plants actually, after a summer season, has actually weathered quite well. So I want to kind of take you through today, just show you how the plants have done, talk about some successes. I'm sure there's going to be some failures in there, but also just so that you can see the progression. Since we showed you our plantings going on in the spring and as things went in, we're going to see how they actually performed. So let's walk through. We're going to kind of go all the way around the house. I'm going to show you all the different beds and we'll see how well everything has turned out. We're going to start right here at the very front at something that I just love. It's not something you find in all garden centers, but just look up here at this beautiful purple hyacinth bean vine. This is an annual vine for us. This actually came back from seed. A lot of times we have to plant the seeds, but now since they've been in 2 or 3 years, there's always enough little seedlings that come up each season. I just love this kind of a romantic feel here before the front door. You'll see all the little blooms that are coming up. Of course, eventually it's going to make these little seed pods all over. Here's one that's already started here. Within this little pod is going to be the plant that comes up next year. So we always try to save a lot of these. A lot of times we give these out at the garden center at Sanders Nursery because people love, once they see these out at the garden center, how beautiful they are. And they're so easy to take care of. Again, it's a vine for us that most of the time now just comes back in the general area where we've planted it. And if you'll look, it's actually growing over here on this trellis. It's reaching out. It grows so fast every day. But I have a hard time kind of wrangling it in. I just love this romantic feel here at the front. And it just kind of makes it look like a casual country house. So I've just let it really run on its own. And actually, if you look all the way up at the top, I just love those purple blooms. I mean, even as a stylist, that would be hard to get the blooms to actually perform and look so beautiful like that. So, but it is really putting on a show today. So I think this is a great way to start the tour. And of course, here at the front, this is a very colorful area. We really like to always have a lot of exciting color. So we plant a lot of different plants. So the trellis have done really well with this mandevilla. It's actually grown quite well. I need to probably give it a little bit more fertilizer. It's a heavy feeder, so it loves a lot of fertilizer, but it's done very well. Of course, things like the plectranthus have done well, the lantana, and there's even the scaevola. Sometimes the scaevola gets covered up by all the other plants, but this year it's done quite well. So I love this mix. Again, I love a very lush feel. I'm not one to do a lot of trimming back, so I love to just see it kind of naturally fall in and out. Of course, the peach drift roses are starting to put out a little more color. If you look closer in here, you'll see there's buds that are coming up. But just look at, this is why I love this particular rose. I love the mix of colors. It'll hold on to these brighter tones, and then as it ages, it gets dark, and then eventually it just goes to kind of a cream, holding some of the color down inside. A beautiful rose that does really, really well. These have not been sprayed with anything all season long. And as you can see, the foliage has actually done quite well. Another favorite plant is the proven winners Rockin Playin the Blues salvia. Up here at the front, these got a little too tall, so we cut these back. And I think today it's going to be a great example to show you what these look like as compared to the ones at the front walk, which I didn't trim back at all this year. But they're starting to put back up. We're probably a couple of months away from a real heavy freeze, so they're going to perform for at least that much more time. And a lot of times, because they're so close to the house and they're covered up, they can really withstand even a couple of light frost before they really die back. So they're doing really well. But of course, probably the showstopper, and this is what we've been waiting to see how well it performed. This is my first year to grow this. The proven winner, SuperTunia Vista Bubblegum, has done so well. I've actually had to cut it back a little bit. It was coming out onto the path. It was going out into the lawn, but it has performed amazingly well. A couple of times I had to spray it with BT just because we had some budworms that I know were getting in there and eating some of the blooms. But just look at how well they have done. I've never had a plant that really filled out this area. We always do annuals here, but most of the time they stay rather small. So these have done wonderful here in this area. Again, I just came in and kind of trimmed out the pathways just so they wouldn't impede too much. And they have actually done really well. And if you kind of look as we go down, I put them in several different little pockets, and I just love the way it spreads that bloom around the front of the landscape. Let's take off on down through here. I want to show you a few other plants that I still feel like are doing quite well. Of course, the coleus that I put in not so long ago is doing wonderfully well. It got kind of a yellow hue when it was really, really hot, but it's going back now to that beautiful lime green, so that's doing well. Again, more peach drift roses. Our Alaskan cedar is performing really well. Our lavender's doing good here. Of course, our lavender needs probably a little bit more sunshine to really start flourishing out for one more bloom this season. But if you look in the back, one of my favorite plants for feeding the hummingbirds, the Skyscraper salvia. This is the pink. Again, it got a little tall, was kind of starting to flop a little bit, so I cut it back and it's starting to produce again. So we'll now have a little bit more bloom time for those hummingbirds as they migrate away from us. But again, a great plant to have. And then notice where I put it right in front of our kitchen window. That's so that when I take the time to clean the kitchen and wash the dishes, that I can stand and watch them, and they just jump around here all day. Coming on around, it's probably been the one garden that anyone that came out this year has really talked about. And it's just kind of this mix, little mini cottage garden that I put in, but it's all of the zinnias. I have just loved the way these zinnias have performed. Of course, in behind here, that is our breakfast room, so it's our breakfast table. And so many people, of course, when you come up to the house, you park here, you come in the mudroom, because most people use our side door entrance. They just comment, how many butterflies? The butterflies, there aren't as many today because it's a little overcast, and I've noticed as the sun comes out a little bit more, the nectar comes up through the zinnias, we have a lot more butterflies flying around. But still, there's plenty around this morning. They have done so well. Again, I like this lush feel. I have a hard time cutting them back. I know you'll cut them and they'll come again, but it's just hard to go in when I just see they're so beautiful. And I've hardly done anything. I've added a little bit of fertilizer in there to give them a little extra food. But again, it's a loose type of planting, not always what I do at the front of a residence, but I have just loved it. I've kept it in this little pocket. I just love the way it's enveloped the statue. And again, something I think I'll do again, I really want to try to incorporate still a few more of the peachy tones. I love the peach color of the drift roses. So I'm wanting to get more of the peachy toned zinnias to kind of add in, but again, just love the way it has performed. So can't complain at all. And like I said, I think it's probably the favorite spot because it's just so floriferous and bright in color. So many people love that. All right, now we're going to walk on around to the front of the sidewalk, and we're going to take a look at some more of that Rockin Playin the Blues salvia. Outside of the zinnias and the drift roses, probably the next plant that I just love so much is this salvia, the Rockin Playin the Blues salvia. If you remember just a second ago, I was talking about when I had cut those back, the blooms were really starting to just come out on those again. These have not been touched all season long. This was what we were dealing with up front so that you can see up close you know, the blooms when it was so extremely hot, they were kind of petering out, they were kind of flopping over, and that was what I was worried about. But I love having the same plant in a couple different areas and treating them a couple of different ways. That way you can see what is the most successful turnout for that plant. And this plant has done so well. As you can see, the new blooms are coming up. They're much more erect. And again, just a wonderful butterfly magnet here at the front walk. Again, going back to that lush, little bit of an overgrown field, that is the field that I love so much. And you certainly get a lot of that as you come here. We're right at the beginning of the sidewalk, which takes you to the front door. So this is for those guests that come the first time and don't know to go to the mudroom door. You come right in here, and I think this is such a beautiful welcoming here. Of course, we have a nice dark contrast here with the purple heart. And then going on up, another great plant that has been so successful for us. This is the Sweet Mademoiselle Rose from the Bloomables collection. We never, ever spray this rose. The foliage is disease and bug bitten free. The blooms have done so well. I need to do some deadheading, but I just love the color and the shape of these blooms are just phenomenal. They're so easy to take care of. And again, instead of having kind of a low rose, maybe the height of the drift rose, I love this lush, tall, kind of enveloping feel that the Sweet Mademoiselle roses bring here to the front. Not a great rose for fragrance. So many roses now, they're struggling. They get this wonderful disease resistance, and the beauty doesn't have a lot of fragrance, but the bloom is just magnificent. And it's another one of those, you cut a lot, it will continue to grow, and it blooms pretty much from when it starts for us, really probably mid-April, all the way until we get a late freeze. Sometimes even at Christmas, we still have a few blooms going on this plant. It's nice and protected here, of course, having the sidewalk. And then in behind, we have the double play quince from Proven Winners. That is the orange. Of course, that hedge kind of envelops it and keeps it nice and protected from the strong winds that come out of the south. And then our bald cypress is doing well. Of course, we had to replace the tree. We had a beautiful maple tree there that was taken out about 3 years ago when we had a terrible windstorm on Father's Day weekend when we lost 60 trees in one day, which was very hard. So we put in several trees that seem to take the wind a lot better and are easy to take care of here in our zone and area. And this bald cypress is certainly doing a great job at that. Overall, I'm very happy. The lambs here doing wonderful. Really happy with this bed, and I love low maintenance plants. That's a thing for me. Still working out at the nursery and trying to take care of animals. I don't have a lot of time for maintenance, so these actually have performed so well this year. Next, I want to step over to the upper berm. We're going to take a look at that and see how it's doing today. So coming down to the berm, I just wanted you to take a peek at the pond. It's actually doing really well. This is a pond that we put in 3 or 4 years after we settled here. And what we're trying to do is create a little natural habitat. We're eventually going to be adding a few ducks or swan to the pond. We're trying to get the environment set first, get the pond all settled, get all the grasses growing up, and we're actually going to be working on some projects and bringing you along throughout the fall and winter time. You know, it's always interesting that time of year to find things to do. It's more of a time of year to do hardscaping and get some more grasses and shrubs and trees put in. So we're actually going to be doing that a little bit later on, but overall the pond is doing really well, and I'm just wanting to add some boulders maybe to soften the edge, add a little bit more interest. We're actually possibly going to be adding a little sitting area in there. And then we have a surprise eventually coming up. We're going to be putting a structure out there as well. So just wanted to give you a peek at that because it's doing really, really well. And here at the upper berm, again, it's probably I think it was the first bed that we put in here. So it was a great testing ground to just really see what's going to do well. We were learning how to garden here in Oklahoma. And overall, it's done really well. We had bagworms on our weeping Norway spruce. So we've been fighting those, as we always do here in Oklahoma. The verbena has done really well. It's not blooming as much right now. So right now there's just a lot of green. Of course, most of the color goes back to having these zinnias in here. They have really performed well. There's even some of the colors that I'm really looking forward to adding to the other garden. We kind of have this corally color here, but I love this just orangey, kind of peachy tone here. This is the color that I'm wanting to add a lot more of. Again, it plays off of that peach drift rose really, really well. So I'm gonna be on the hunt for some of those for sure. Overall, this bed has done really well. It's one that I don't baby as much because I take care of the beds a lot more closely up around the house. Those are the ones I see. So we've added things like hardy hibiscus, Joe Pye weed, blue-black salvia around, which all have done really well. Not so many tender annuals, things like that. But coming up here really soon, what we're gonna do is come in, we're gonna be adding some mums, some pansies, and pumpkins. I love pumpkins. If you followed along, you know that that's something that I absolutely enjoy adding each fall season. So we'll be adding those into this area as well. Of course, this is a berm that you see as you're coming up the drive to the house, and it kind of introduces you to what you're going to find once you get on up to the main part of the property. All right, I think we're going to carry on around. I want to take you to the west side of the house and show you the shade garden. We're going to check on the hosta, the fern, and see how that bed has done this year. Well, I don't know if you can tell, but the wind is starting to feel like fall. It's such a wonderfully cool day today. I love the cool temperatures and the change in the weather. But with that brings a little bit of a different look. We've had a lot of leaves that have fallen off of this cottonwood tree. The cottonwood drops leaves all the time, it seems like. When it gets the slightest bit dry or a little too wet, it's always dropping leaves, as you can probably see. But I love the fact that it gives us a lot of shade here on the west side of the house. This is a very hot side, and to have a shade garden, a hosta garden on the west side is really miraculous here in Oklahoma. They've done quite well. We've had a lot of leaves that have been falling, and we've been cleaning them up. So as we go through the tour, you're going to notice probably some broken branches, and that's where we've had the rake out as well. But I did want to bring you back and show you what it's looking like this year. Of course, Colonel loves hanging out in this garden too because it's so nice and cool. But the hostas have been just beautiful. If you've watched any of my previous videos where we've highlighted this area, I've told you how much I really just like greenish tone hostas. I don't like a lot of white in the hostas that I put in the garden. Sometimes when you put white in and everything else is green, your eye goes to that one thing that really is different. So it's really just varying shades of green. And you can see here, just with a few of the hosta leaves that I have picked up, there's so many different leaf patterns, shapes, sizes, and some that are just phenomenal. I know this is one of my favorites. Of course, I have so many now, I forget the names of a lot of them. But just look at that beautiful change in color of that one. This one sits just outside of our master bathroom window, and I see it every day, and it certainly has become a favorite. I love when there's severe changes in the color. You have just really this light stripe of lime green and then those really dark greens on the outer edge. Again, there's just so many different varieties and sizes, and I think a hosta garden looks really good when there is a really good mix going on. So if you are a hosta fan like I am, think about maybe what impresses you if you're just liking the color changes. A lot of people love the blooms. I'm not really big on the blooms, but I typically leave them as long as they're blooming for the pollinators because the bees really love those hosta blooms. But overall, it's doing good. Of course, this is the bed that has been here for 2 or 3 years. This is the bed we put in actually mostly this year. So still very young plants. What will be interesting is to come back in the spring next year and see how much all of these develop. Of course, some have done better than others. Some get more sun than others. We're still trying to create this completely shade area. We have more and more trees that we're adding up here. Of course, if you look straight ahead, that's the sugar maple. Hasn't begun to turn any colors yet. We have our autumn blaze maples on the ends. And then we have these Japanese maples that are going to make great understory trees here in the shade garden. So again, first year garden, really, I think it's doing really well. We'll probably add a little bit of fall color back here too. So it'll be interesting to see what we can come up with. But overall, I've been really happy. Of course, having an above average amount of rain this year has really helped this part of the garden. The hellebores are doing well. Those will be the first things to bloom. You like early bloomers in the garden, hellebores. Of course, I like black blooms. I love those black flowers, rose colored. So we'll be coming back probably in January, February and checking on those. And the rest of the garden at that time will probably be asleep. But again, it's had a little bit of a stress over some of the heat, but I think next year the garden will really take off back here. All right, we're going to continue on around. I want to take you around to the pollinator garden and we'll see how it's looking today. Come on, Colonel. Hippo. Hippo. So now we've moved around to the north side of the house, and this is what we call the butterfly garden or the pollinator garden. And this is where I just like to mix up all the colors, just let everything really come to life because it seems to really draw in all of the pollinators. Butterfly bush here is doing really well, starting to bloom back out. Of course, the swallowtails, I see some of those running around, or flying around, I should say, right now on these. Again, there's so many different mix of colors and plants. Of course, this is where we keep our milkweed. We also keep our bronze fennel, host plants for butterflies. Those are all back in this area. And then in the last video, we were planting a lot of this just extra color to add late season. We put in the purple fountain grass down here in the front. Of course, that won't last throughout the winter, but it just adds a nice autumnal color and feel here to the bed. Some ornamental mustards here in the front, a little bit more of the milkweed. Again, this is tropical milkweed, may not last all season long, and it's kind of been known that you really want to have this variety to die back to the ground completely. I know some states, maybe California, Arizona, don't like for their gardeners to use this type because if it doesn't die all the way back to the ground, it can hold some chemicals that are a little bit toxic to the pollinators. So I'm learning a lot about different types of milkweed. So it's real interesting to see all the different varieties that are out there. Another great plant to have in the garden this time of year, which comes back to life after the spring, just look at this clematis here on the birdhouse. I believe this is Dr. Rupel. Again, I'm going to have to get better about writing everything down so I can remember all of these names. This one is actually putting on its fall flush of flowers. Beautiful blooms. I love that stripe. It gives you that variation of color on all of those petals. So another wonderful plant. Comes in many different colors. I love unique stripes, color tones, things like that. And this one is certainly doing well. Step over here, I want to show you this passion fruit lantana. We're going to look and see how well it has performed this summer season. So if you can't tell, the passion fruit lantana is a showstopper. Just look at all of this beautiful bloom. It is a lantana that I am definitely falling in love with. This is the second year that we've grown it here. It never stops blooming, and it just makes this wonderful mound here in the landscape. Again, it's passion fruit lantana, and I haven't had it to overwinter for us. It did die out last year. You know, this is the north side of the house, and I always leave the space to just see how some of our lantanas will come back, but this one has not. But talk about an annual that puts on a show. Just look at that. Again, another great pollinator plant here in the pollinator garden. Coming on around, of course, the phlox is still doing really well, holding a lot of color. And this beautiful Caryopteris, it's a plant that blooms late summer, early fall for us here in Zone 7. And it's a plant that a lot of people overlook in the spring, and we tell them, if you'll think about also having some plants that are going to bloom in the fall that extends that bloom period in your garden. And this is a wonderful, wonderful plant to have. They haven't quite come out at our entrance gate, but when those come out, I want to show you the Caryopteris down there. Again, it's just a explosion of blue color late in the season that you're not expecting, and a wonderful plant that everyone should have. Going on around, you can see the daylilies, of course, are green. They're beautiful, just no blooms. A little bit more yarrow. This was that Nicotiana, the ornamental tobacco. Of course, here's a stalk that's kind of fallen over. But again, a lot of these things are just at the end of their season. So I love to bring in this late season color sometimes. I'm just like many of you. I'm so focused on that spring, summer bloom, but I'm wanting to feed those pollinators still late this time of season. We're still waiting on that major migration of the butterflies to come from the north. They come right through this area here in northeast Oklahoma. So I want to have plenty of plants still working out the pollen to make them happy along the way. This is another one of those sweet Mademoiselle roses that was up front. This one was cut back, so it's not quite as tall, but it is getting ready. If you look really close, it does have a lot of blooms that are going to be coming out. So it is a great rose to have that gives you several flushes throughout the season. So we'll be coming back and checking on that a little bit later. The angel trumpet, look at the angel trumpets. Because it's a little cloudy today, they haven't put out a lot of blooms today, but it's been beautiful throughout the summer. At night, the fragrance is just wonderful. Just look at that beautiful color down in there. I wish it was a little bit sunnier day just so that they would have put out some new blooms, but this is a plant that is tender for us. We usually cut these back, dig them up, and put them in the greenhouse over winter and bring them back. But I mean, why wouldn't you? They give this wonderful kind of mid-height range, a wonderful place for the butterflies and hummingbirds to get in height and land. And certainly the fragrance at the night is beautiful. And of course, we've added more purple fountain grass. I just had a little bit of dye out. I think this was the Nicotiana where we took the old blooms out. So I wanted to fill that in. This is the Mystic Spire salvia that we have here. We cut it back because it was a little bit leggy. But again, it's putting up new blooms here. It's going to be performing really well. We added those hardy hibiscus the last time. Our lily blooms, we're letting these really put a lot of energy back down into the roots before we cut those back. So we're going to let those die back naturally. Another one of the hardy hibiscus. And here's a little bit more of that Skyscraper salvia. Again, bringing the same plants that maybe you have in one part of the garden around to another part. It really makes the garden feel as one. So I like bringing a lot of the same plants around to the back that we have in the front. Maybe not as many, but it is nice to have a touch of these here in the back. The candy corn spirea from Proven Winners be getting ready to put out a little extra bloom here before long and taking on its fallish color. You can see the tips are starting to turn there. One more thing I want to show you is this arbor here in the back. So let's take a step on around and I'm going to show you how well it's looking today. Of course, probably the crown to this garden this week is what is growing on this arbor. I want you to just look at the hyacinth bean vine that has really taken over this arbor. We built this arbor to be really tall and massive, to really fit within the space really well. We have a really large backyard. Of course, this is a pretty good sized garden, so we didn't really want to bring in a trellis that was maybe ready-made. Sometimes those are only 7 to 8 feet tall. And when many of these plants get this tall, it really dwarfs structures like this. But beautiful tall structure here has just really allowed this hyacinth bean vine to take off. If you'll look all the way up to the top, you can see that actually this year is almost already up there. It's actually hitting the finial. One of the finials, we had a storm, we lost the spire, so I'm going to have that worked on. But you can see the one on the front, it's going on up there. That'll be so neat. I love to see how far it gets each season and each year because the weather has been so well. We've had so much rain. It hasn't been too terribly hot for too long. It has been so happy here, and it's just covered in blooms. You know, the thing about this hyacinth bean vine that I want to point out to you is it's an annual vine. And a lot of times if you put a perennial vine on there that's going to come back each year, I know a lot of people struggle with wisteria and ivy. And sometimes they'll take over a structure and smother it, and it becomes a real nuisance. This plant dies back to the ground every year. Then we take off those dead branches in the middle of the winter. Once the freeze comes, that's when it kills it back. And then it starts at the ground and it'll grow up, and it's not a maintenance nightmare. So I think having a structure like this, or even just like at the front of the house, like I was showing you, having something that will die back that's not just this monster that takes over, is a great way of having climbers, something that is kind of easy to take care of. So again, it's the hyacinth bean vine. You can look them up. A lot of seed companies, Baker Seed probably has them. That's a seed company I love to go to. Sheepers, I'm sure they probably do as well. And again, once you have them, remember you can save those seed pods and plant them each year. They do need the soil to be very warm before they start coming out of the ground. And a lot of people think, well, I just didn't have any come back this year. Sometimes it takes until June for many of us here in Oklahoma to really get the soil that warm for those seeds to sprout. So a wonderful vine to have. You need to remember that, the hyacinth bean vine. Another example of a vine that can be a little bit of a booger is this honeysuckle vine. This is a red blooming honeysuckle. I love the feel though that it has here on this vintage birdhouse. It gets a little carried away. We do have to trim it back, but I love the kind of skirted effect it gives on this old birdhouse. It has a real vintage feel. And again, it's a wonderful place. I notice the birds, when the birdhouse is a little full, if you look at the bottom, I'm going to have to get in and take care of cleaning this one out. They'll get down inside this honeysuckle and play and jump. And it's a wonderful little kind of protective ground. Once the babies come out, they can get down in there, have an easier time getting down to the ground. So I love having things like this that actually accentuate these decorative accents in the garden. And of course, if you look around, it is the perfect place for the butterfly garden because there are just still tons and tons of butterflies that are going on. So coming up soon, we're going to be actually jumping on the back side of this border and finally putting in the bed around the potting shed. We've been really waiting for a little while. Our guys who've been working on the potting shed, they've had their other jobs going on, but they're going to be coming back. We'll get the windows in. It's been kind of a long, drawn-out project, but I'm excited to get that started. And what it will do, it will extend this bed on over to the other side of the potting shed. So it's going to really turn into a whole new area over the next year, and I can't wait to get that area started as well. Well, I think we're going to wrap it up here. I think this has been a great garden tour, and you certainly can see what it's looking like here in Northeast Oklahoma in the middle of September. And remember, if you liked this video, be sure to subscribe, like, and follow me, the Preppy Gardener, and I look forward to being back with another video very soon.